Welcome to yet another in the series of Eco-nomics discussion series. Today we're going to talk about biodiversity data. Before we do that though, so I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners and the lands on which we come and the lands which we're going to speak about, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. So today's topic is around biodiversity data, following on from a discussion last week about the biodiversity kind of modelling approaches that we intend to use. So this is about the data that we might use to drive those approaches. But I'll just give a quick background first for context and for those who missed the previous session. So the Eco-nomics platform, there are 4 key elements to it. Eco-nomics plan, so this is a subcatchment level lump model for coming up with investment portfolios. Following on from that, we'll be working on economics projects, so it's a farm scale project capture and modelling application. Economics report is about being able to do impact reporting to communicate the planned work or work that's been done. And economics market is about being able to facilitate these projects that get developed to be able to use them within a marketplace. So we're focusing on economics plan at this stage of the project. An economics plan, it's a subcatchment level lump modelling approach for rapid investment portfolio generation. The audience here is investors, and the users are those investors, NRM bodies, local government authorities. And the approach is to have a consistent approach across large spatial scales so that we can share the type of actions, so the on-ground implementations that might occur. And so in that case, we're constrained to data and approaches that can be applied across large areas. So a whole of NRM region at least. So we're proposing to base this on what we've done in the reefonomics area across the 6 regional body areas of the Great Barrier Reef catchments, and including quantitative and qualitative measures. Following on from that will be economics project, and it's relevant for this discussion just to have some context. So economics project, farm scale, project design and capture, but it allows us to have very locally specific information, so to be able to spatial intersects and overlays, and that matters in this biodiversity discussions because we've got some really great spatial data that doesn't necessarily have excellent spatial coverage, but locally it's very good, so we'll be able to use that in economics project. So firstly, economics plan, then economics project, and they share the same concept in so much as we do actions, so on-ground work. Those actions affect the measures, and those measures collectively aggregate up to allow us to report on values. So in economics plan, what we're focusing on for the biodiversity or the biological side of things is about being able to represent an area change in different quality vegetation areas. And then economics project, something more sophisticated. But the general concept persists. Action does work on a measure, reports on a value. So thinking about an example action, we might have a community riparian revegetation program focusing on connecting songlines along a waterway. We've got some how that action affects different measures. So this might be one measure, increased area of riparian vegetation, and that's part of some overall kind of biodiversity score. So if we expand that out to think about the broader collection of measures that action might impact upon, is our current collection of measures, and at each meeting, if you've been playing along at home, this list keeps getting bigger and bigger. So in this case, we're focusing on the biodiversity world. We had a discussion last week about the biophysical side of things. So I'm currently at a series of different wetland related vegetation measures, riverine, lacustrine, palustrine and estuaries, and then also terrestrial woody vegetation. So the dark areas here are things that we think we can have a good crack at having a quantitative representation, and the lighter grey ones will intend to represent in a qualitative way using a Likert scale approach, which we covered in an earlier session. So generally how this thing works, we've got some base data, some area available to do work, and then we've got the load condition, or in this case, the available area of the things that we might care about. So if our action might be this riparian revegetation work, so we know the area available, so the area of bare stream banks, and again, we might have the area available stream bank as a measure as well, but we also might have different classes of vegetation. So these might represent, you know, a high quality riparian vegetation versus lower quality riparian vegetation. So we apply the action, it applies over an area, has an impact on the load condition or area, and that impact could be negative as well. Then we run through an accounting process to manage the available area to do future work and manage the load condition for area. Along with the base data, we've got a confidence associated with that base data, and we've got a confidence associated with the impact of the action on that base data, and they get combined to give us an overall confidence in the predicted outcome. So what we're proposing to do here to quantifying the biodiversity is not to quantify the biodiversity at all, but to use vegetation area as a proxy, and relying on the great spatial layers that the Queensland state government has developed. And we're focusing on this in our initial pilot area of the southern Queensland landscapes, or the broadly the Queensland Murray-Darling region. So we're looking at the moment at riverine, so wetland, the wetland layer, but the riverine component, so the stream network, lacustrine, and then palustrine, which is sort of swamps and billabong, so things with a lot of vegetation. Lacustrines largely open water bodies, estuarine areas, and then terrestrial revegetation. And we propose that the actions, for example, revegetation, will increase the area of these different vegetation classes or different vegetation areas, and then they might even have a subclass within them. So within Eco-nomics, and we propose to do the same here, we've got the concept of sub areas. So we can have palustrine wetlands, and then different grades of palustrine wetlands, so the relative condition of those, to be able to track that through. We've got an additional consideration that applies specifically or predominantly to vegetation management, and it's about the concept of trying to quantify the benefit of avoided destruction. So what's the value of protecting remnant vegetation? And we propose to use a business as usual approach, which we're going to talk about on Wednesday. But fundamentally, the approach here is to look at recent history, clearing rates, and apply those as an action. So that action will remove vegetation, and in which case the concept of protecting vegetation, we consider that as an additional or a new activity. With the concept of continued clearing and then protection, combine those things, and with a bit of luck, mass balance will prevail. So where we're up to is trying to find the most appropriate spatial layers, and then the most appropriate attributes within those spatial layers around the vegetation. So I've got a follow-up task to catch up with the Queensland Government about the different spatial layers we've got here. So we've got a series of wetlands layers that gives us the spatial location of these different wetland types, the wetland environmental values, and there's also another remnant vegetation cover layer, which is quite interesting and represented across the entire state. And then there's the slats. So it's a woody vegetation cover across the entire state. And that's actually done through time as well. So you've got to change through time. And I think from 2018 onwards, we've got a sort of higher resolution representation of that, which is really good quality data with a great spatial coverage. So that's where we're up to. And in terms of our list of presentations, we've got a business as usual coming up on Wednesday before we get into some economic discussions. So I'll post this video on economics.net.au/videos. Thank you for following along.